47 years. That is the length of time the Islamic Republic of Iran has existed and fought with a single weapon, not missiles, not oil, not proxy forces spread across the Middle East. That weapon is time. The 1979 hostage crisis, 52 American citizens held for 444 days. Washington got angry, issued threats, negotiated, then exhausted itself. Iran waited. In the end, the Americans were released exactly on the day Ronald Reagan was sworn in, as if Tehran wanted to send a message. We choose the timing, not you. Then came the bloody 8-year Iran-Iraq war, a conflict the whole world thought would crush the young regime in Tehran. Iran waited. Saddam Hussein fell first. And in every round of nuclear negotiations since then, from the Bush era, Obama, Trump's first term, Biden, Iran has applied the same formula. Drag it out, make tiny concessions, wait until the US government changes or Washington's attention shifts elsewhere. That tactic has worked for nearly half a century. But today, for the first time in 47 years, something is changing that equation, and the evidence is not in what Iran is saying. The officials are still appearing on television with confident tones, still saying everything is under control. The evidence lies in what Iran is doing. And when you look at what is really happening inside Iran's economy, inside their financial networks, and inside the peace proposal they just sent to Washington, the picture that emerges is very different. I am Ryan Mitchell. Let's begin. Let's begin with what is happening inside Iran's economy, and why it is more dangerous than any military attack. On April 13th, the U.S. Navy imposed a full blockade at the Strait of Hormuz and Persian Gulf ports. The results came almost immediately. According to data from maritime analytics firm Clapper, Iran's oil exports dropped from 2.1 million barrels per day to 567,000 barrels in just a few days. Only 5 shipments were recorded in the first 10 days after the blockade took effect. The U.S. Department of Defense estimates Iran has lost $4.8 billion in oil revenue as of May 1. The White House gave a more specific figure, $500 million per day. And when you cannot export the oil, that oil has to go somewhere, and it is going straight into storage. According to the Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy, storage at Karg Island, Iran's main oil export island, increased by 6 million barrels in just 8 days from April 13 to 21. As of April 20, Karg storage had reached 74% capacity. The industry's normal safety threshold is 80%. Iran is moving toward it very quickly. Kepler projects that if the blockade continues, Iran could run out of storage in 12 to 22 days. On April 26, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent posted on X, Karg Island storage will be full in a few days, and Iran's fragile oil wells will have to shut down. Meanwhile, a senior Iranian official confirmed the country has begun cutting production. They call it a precautionary measure. Oil spokesman Hamid Hosseini appeared before the media, saying the industry has enough experience and there is nothing to worry about. And this is where we need to recall the principle mentioned at the beginning of the video. Do not listen to what they say, watch what they are doing. Because while Hosseini was reassuring the public, Iran's Ministry of Industry and Trade was warning citizens to be cautious when buying cars because prices are rising due to artificial market manipulation with no real economic basis. The same ministry confirmed plans to import used cars from abroad to compensate for supply. When a government has to import used cars while the oil spokesman says everything is fine, that is a signal you need to read. Now, to be fair, Iran has done this before. During the 2012, 2013, and 2019-2020 sanctions rounds, the National Iranian Oil Company had to shut wells and restart them. They have real experience, teams of engineers who know how to do it without long-term damage. Hosseini is not lying when he mentions this. But here is the key point most commentators are missing. Those previous times were financial sanctions. Cash flows were blocked, but Iran could still pump oil. They could still find buyers through workarounds. They could still maintain pressure in the wells. This time, it is a physical naval blockade. Oil is pumped but has nowhere to go. It accumulates in storage. When storage is full, pumping has to stop. This is not a difference in degree, it is a difference in kind. And the consequences of sudden shutdowns at old oil wells are what Iran truly fears. Expert Antoine Half from the Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy explains it clearly. If wells are shut in a controlled, planned manner, damage can be minimized. But if forced to shut suddenly because storage is overflowing, the risk of permanent damage to the geological structure is real. Trump put it more bluntly, when it blows, you cannot rebuild it like before. Of course, Iran is not sitting idle waiting for that to happen. They are using every option left. First is floating storage, 18 to 20 sanctioned oil tankers anchored in the Gulf, serving as temporary floating warehouses, adding about 21 million barrels of capacity. Second is the shadow fleet, a fleet of ghost tankers operating outside normal controls. Maritime intelligence firm Windward detected Iran falsifying GPS positioning data, using fake flags registered in distant countries like Malawi in Africa, Guyana in South America, and Curaçao in the Caribbean to evade control systems. Al Jazeera tracked 220 voyages of 185 vessels through Hormuz from early March to mid-April, and found 77 trips, 38.5%, directly or indirectly linked to Iran. Lloyd's List confirmed at least 26 Shadow Fleet vessels have breached the blockade, but CENTCOM is responding too. 37 vessels intercepted as of April 29th, 45 vessels as of May 1, and the pursuit range has been expanded globally, not just at Hormuz. More notably, Iran is not only smuggling crude oil, they are also operating LPG carriers to keep the entire energy value chain under the radar. Third is overland, and this is where the numbers get really interesting. Across the Iran-Pakistan border, trucks and motorcycles are transporting about 250,000 to 300,000 barrels per day. If you watch videos from the border area, you will see endless convoys, trucks, motorcycles carrying plastic jerry cans, all moving back and forth in both directions. Tehran calls this an alternative solution. But look at the real numbers. To replace the cargo of just one large tanker with 2 million barrels, you need 17,000 motorcycles each carrying a 20-liter can. 17,000 motorcycles for one tanker. This is not a solution. It is buying time. And Iran knows it well. Iran has studied Venezuela's case closely, a country that survived years of sanctions using similar tactics. But Venezuela never faced a complete naval blockade. Iran is entering uncharted territory with no precedent to follow. So what is the real question? Fernando Ferreira from Rappian Energy put it most precisely: who has the longer runway, Trump or Iran? On Iran's side, storage full in 12 to 22 days, losing $500 million per day, oil wells at risk of permanent damage. According to Ferreira's conservative estimate, Iran has about 26 days before it is forced to cut production, up to 48 days if counting all floating and onshore capacity. On the U.S. side, Brent oil prices have exceeded $120 per barrel. Gasoline prices in America hit $4 per gallon on March 31. Midterm elections are coming in November, and allies in Asia and Europe are facing severe energy shortages. This is a war of two countdown clocks, and both are running simultaneously toward the same finish line. But economic pressure is only one front. The second front, and perhaps more dangerous for Iran, is what is happening to the financial network they spent years building. And to understand why that network is collapsing, we need to start from a decision Iran made during the war, a decision that to this day remains the most puzzling strategic mistake of the entire conflict. That mistake did not happen on the battlefield. It happened in a meeting room in Tehran when someone decided that the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, needed to be attacked. And to understand why that decision was a disaster, you need to understand what role the UAE really played for Iran over many years, not the role they declared publicly, but the role they actually played in the shadows. In March this year, parallel to the military campaign, President Trump signed an order launching Operation Economic Fury, not a military campaign, but a comprehensive economic strangulation campaign coordinated between the Treasury Department and the U.S. Navy. And when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent appeared in a recent interview, he used a very specific image to describe the current phase. We have been running a marathon for the past 12 months, and now we are sprinting to the finish. He added, "This is a real economic blockade. The entire government is involved. Everyone is in the fight." And then he said a sentence I want you to remember: they cannot pay their soldiers. That was not a boastful statement for the press. It was a factual description of the financial state of a regime trying to maintain a massive military apparatus while its main revenue sources are completely blocked. But to understand why Operation Economic Fury is working so effectively, and why it is more effective than all previous sanctions combined, you need to understand a reality that both Tehran and Washington had quietly accepted for years. The UAE was the IRGC's underground financial center. For many years, the United Arab Emirates was where the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps operated shell companies, maintained offshore accounts, and conducted sanction-evading transactions worth billions of dollars. Dubai did not ask about the origin of the money. Abu Dhabi did not investigate too closely. The UAE looked the other way, not because they did not know, but because the economic benefits of being the region's financial hub outweighed the political costs of cooperating with U.S. sanctions. This was a reality both sides quietly understood and no one spoke about. And that is why Iran was able to survive decades of sanctions, because even when official cash flows were blocked, the underground flows through the UAE continued. Then Iran decided to attack the UAE with 2,000 missiles and drones. Let me repeat that number, 2,000 missiles and drones, aimed at the country that had been helping Iran evade sanctions, helping the IRGC keep its offshore money, helping the Tehran regime survive each wave of U.S. pressure. This was the most serious strategic mistake Iran made in the entire conflict. I am not saying that in a military sense. I am saying it in a financial and geopolitical sense. Imagine it this way. You are being chased by the police. There is someone hiding you in their warehouse, helping you move money, helping you maintain your underground life, and you decide to punch that person straight in the face. After the attack, the UAE had no other choice politically or security-wise. They could no longer look the other way while Iranian drones were falling on their territory. And Besant described what happened next very clearly. The Gulf neighbors that I previously described as quite lenient, they have been very active, proactively coming forward and providing us with details, allowing us to freeze those assets. He added, the IRGC is watching assets stolen over many years, many decades, over 47 years, being frozen and vanishing very quickly. The UAE went even further, declaring that OPEC no longer suits their interests. Besant commented succinctly, most monopoly organizations eventually collapse under their own weight. At the same time, the U.S. Treasury carried out a large-scale sanctions round on February 25, targeting dozens of individuals, entities, and oil tankers linked to Iran's underground oil network. One of the most notable targets was China's teapot refineries, small and medium-sized refineries that specialized in buying discounted Iranian oil without asking questions about origin. Before the war, about 90% of Iran's oil exports went to China, equivalent to 1.38 million barrels per day, and most of that went through these teapot refineries. These plants operate on extremely thin profit margins. Being placed on the U.S. sanctions list is not a financial challenge. It is a death sentence. No bank dares to work with them. No partner dares to sign contracts. China may object diplomatically, but small private businesses do not have the strength to withstand that pressure. And CENTCOM expanded the shadow fleet pursuit globally, no longer limited to Hormuz, but able to intercept Iran-linked vessels anywhere on the ocean. Now let's talk about Pakistan, because this is where the story becomes much more complicated than what you see in the headlines. Pakistan is a nominal U.S. ally. Islamabad receives aid from Washington. The two countries have a decades-long history of military and intelligence cooperation, yet Pakistan is openly helping Iran evade the U.S. blockade. This is a clear contradiction, and it needs to be explained rather than ignored. To understand why Pakistan is acting this way, you need to understand how real power actually operates in Islamabad. Pakistan is nominally a democracy with a prime minister and parliament. But in reality, the Pakistani military controls strategic economic sectors from land and real estate to border trade routes. The civilian government is the facade. Real decisions come from the general headquarters. And oil smuggling across the Iran-Pakistan border is not accidental corruption by a few local officials. It is a systemic power structure from which the military directly benefits. On April 25, Pakistan officially activated 6 overland transit routes through Pakistani territory into Iran. Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi flew to Islamabad, meeting directly with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Asim Munir. The shortest route, Gwadar to Gabd, shortens transport time from 18 hours to 2 to 3 hours, reducing logistics costs by 45 to 55%. More than 3,000 Iran-bound containers stuck at Karachi port were released through this new corridor. When the Pakistan story became big news, Trump was asked directly in front of the press, "Why is a U.S. ally helping Iran survive the blockade?" Trump's answer was notable not for what he said, but for what he did not say. He mentioned Field Marshal, mentioned Prime Minister, showed respect and admiration, then did not answer the question directly. Many read that as awkwardness or lack of information, but in reality it was a calculated choice. Pakistan is currently the only remaining intermediary between Washington and Tehran. All important diplomatic channels, from the April ceasefire proposal to relaying Iran's 14-point peace proposal to Trump, go through Islamabad. If Trump pressures Pakistan to fully close the border, he loses the only communication channel with Iran at a time when both sides need a diplomatic off-ramp. That is why Trump's evasive answer was not foolishness. It was a deliberate balancing between economic pressure and maintaining the negotiation channel. But look at the numbers straight. 6 new overland routes, maximum capacity 250,000 to 300,000 barrels per day, less than 20% of Iran's exports before the blockade began. The UAE was not just a transport route. The UAE was the financial center handling billions of dollars in transactions, shell companies, offshore accounts, and underground money transfer systems that Iran had used to evade sanctions for decades. Pakistan can only handle physical goods. It cannot replace the financial system the UAE provided. No overland route can transport a shell company. No truck can carry an offshore account. The financial network Iran spent years building, nurturing, and hiding has been shattered in a few weeks because of a military attack decision that may have made tactical sense, but was a strategic financial disaster. Iran entered the negotiating table without its most important card, the ability to tell Washington that sanctions are fine, we still have ways to export oil and maintain cash flow. That card is gone. And the message to all other countries considering helping Iran evade sanctions, from small nations registering fake flags for the shadow fleet to larger trading partners, is very clear. The political and economic cost of helping Iran has just skyrocketed. The UAE is a living lesson. Besant looks to the future with notable optimism. He believes oil prices after the conflict ends will be significantly lower than at any point in 2025. Because when the blockade is lifted, supply is released, and Iran no longer plays the role of a controlling variable in OPEC as before. With all that pressure bearing down on Tehran, storage filling day by day, the underground financial network just shattered, the shadow fleet being hunted across the oceans, Iran has just sent Washington what they call a peace proposal. And before going into details, I need to make one important point clear about the source of information. Everything we know about the content of this proposal comes from Iranian state media. That means what has been publicized is what Iran wants the world to see, the things that benefit them, the things that make them look reasonable and well-intentioned. Any real concessions Iran is offering, if any, will not appear in any report from Tehran. Keep that in mind as you hear what follows. The initial proposal was structured in 3 phases. Phase 1. Turn the current ceasefire into a complete end to the war within 30 days. Lift the naval blockade. Let Iran manage the removal of mines in Hormuz themselves and obtain a non-aggression commitment from both the US and Israel. Phase 2. Iran returns to uranium enrichment at 3.6% under what they call a zero stockpile principle, meaning enrichment but no accumulation. And more importantly, Iran refuses to dismantle any nuclear facilities. In return, the US and Israel commit not to attack Iran and its allies. Phase 3. Iran proposes entering strategic dialogue with neighboring Arab countries to build a regional security system for the entire Middle East. Let's pause at Phase 3 for a moment, because there is a notable internal contradiction here. The neighboring Arab countries Iran wants to sit down with for strategic dialogue are precisely the ones Iran just attacked with missiles and drones less than 30 days ago. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, These countries have just endured attacks from Iran, seen their energy infrastructure threatened, and now Iran wants to invite them into a regional security dialogue led by Tehran. That is not diplomacy. That is a power map Iran still wants to redraw on its own terms, even while in a position of weakness. Iran then sent a more detailed 14-point proposal through the Pakistani intermediary channel. This list includes complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region, lifting the blockade, war reparations to Iran, Iran retaining control of the Strait of Hormuz, and ending the war on all fronts, including Lebanon. The most notable point in this 14-point proposal is what Iran does not mention. The nuclear issue is completely deferred to a later stage after the blockade has been lifted and the war has ended. An Iranian official admitted to the press that this is a significant change to create more favorable conditions for a deal. The U.S. side is different. Washington wants Iran to give up 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium and suspend the entire enrichment program for at least a decade. Iran's clear response: the right to enrich uranium is non-negotiable. When Trump was asked directly about Iran's proposal, his first answer was, "I have not read it, I am looking at it here." A moment later he added, "They have given me the general concept of the agreement, they will give me the exact wording later." Then he posted a message on social media that I want to quote verbatim because it is important. "I will review the plan that Iran has just sent us soon, but I cannot imagine that it can be accepted in any way. They have not paid a high enough price for what they have done to humanity and the world over the past 47 years. 47 years. Trump himself used that number, the same number we started this video with. And that is not a random coincidence. It is how both sides are defining this conflict, not as a war over nuclear weapons or oil straits, but as a reckoning nearly half a century in the making. Trump went even further when talking about missiles. 85% of Iran's missile production capacity has been wiped out, and he wants to wipe out the rest. He also posed a question more straightforward than any diplomatic statement. If we leave right now, it will take them 20 years to rebuild. Reading between those lines, the signal is very clear. America does not feel it is in a position where it needs to hurry. Meanwhile, inside Iran, the picture is far more complex than what Tehran presents to the outside. Foreign Minister Arakchi admitted to intermediaries in Islamabad that there is no consensus within Iran's leadership on how far to concede on the nuclear issue. Iran refuses to sit down for direct negotiations with Washington as long as the blockade remains in place, but continues communicating through the Pakistani channel. And IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi issued a warning both sides need to hear. Any nuclear agreement is meaningless without an independent international verification mechanism. He said bluntly, "No verification, no agreement. That is just an illusion of an agreement." Now let's pause and look at the overall picture, because this is where all the individual events begin to connect into a single logic. The central question every analyst is asking is, why does Iran want to lift the blockade first and defer the nuclear issue to later? The answer is much simpler than what diplomats want to admit. Storage at Karg will be full in 12 to 22 days. Iran needs to breathe, literally, economically, right now, not after nuclear negotiations end. If the blockade is lifted before a nuclear deal, what happens? Iran pumps oil again. Revenue resumes. Frozen assets gradually released. Economic pressure eases. And when pressure eases, Iran returns to its familiar position, sitting at the negotiating table with enough time and resources to drag things out indefinitely. Axios and Trump's team recognize this and say it plainly. Lifting the blockade and ending the war before a nuclear deal would eliminate all of President Trump's leverage. This is exactly the 47-year waiting doctrine, only packaged in a seemingly reasonable peace proposal. But there is one important difference from all previous times. In the past, when Iran used the waiting tactic, they waited from a position of strength. They had oil flowing, money coming in, the underground financial network running smoothly through Dubai, and time truly on their side. This time, Iran is trying to apply the same tactic while bleeding from multiple wounds at once, storage filling with nowhere to go, the UAE turning its back and freezing IRGC assets, the shadow fleet being hunted from Hormuz to the Bay of Bengal, Chinese teapot refineries being sanctioned one by one. This is no longer a strong tactic executed from a position of options. This is the last remaining tactic of a regime that is gradually running out of options. And the nuclear red line says it all. Iran refuses to dismantle any nuclear facilities, not because they are confident, but because they cannot. After Khamenei's assassination, after 85% of missile capacity destroyed, after the naval force shattered, the nuclear program is the only thing left that Tehran's leadership can use as a final bargaining chip, the regime's survival insurance in any future negotiations. Giving it up is not just a diplomatic concession, it is stripping away the last weapon. The internal contradictions in Iran that Araghchi admitted are not about whether to concede, but about how much to concede while still keeping the regime standing after the smoke clears. The two sides are playing two completely different games on the same board. Iran is playing the time game, dragging it out long enough for gasoline prices in America to keep rising, for pressure from energy-short Asian and European allies to build up enough for the November midterm elections to become unavoidable political pressure on the Republicans. America is playing the physical pressure game, pushing Iran to the point where the waiting doctrine is no longer physically viable, where storage overflows and wells begin to fail before any negotiations can conclude. But here is what both sides know, and no one wants to say plainly. America also has its own countdown clock. $4 a gallon gasoline is not a harmless number for a party preparing for midterm elections. Allies in Asia, Japan, South Korea, India are facing severe energy pressure and are applying diplomatic pressure to find an exit. Europe is facing the risk of a second energy crisis after 2022. The final question is not who has the better strategy, but who reaches their own domestic political limit first. And that is a question no one in Washington or Tehran can answer with certainty right now. Let's look at the entire picture once more, because the three things happening to Iran simultaneously are not three separate stories. They are three attacks on the same fatal weakness. The naval blockade is depriving Iran of what it needs most right now: physical time. Time to pump oil, to export, to maintain enough cash flow to sustain a state apparatus at war. The mistake of attacking the UAE has deprived Iran of what it spent years building: the underground financial network, the system of shell companies, offshore accounts, and partners willing to look the other way, what helped Tehran survive decades of sanctions. And the peace proposal just sent to Washington shows the most worrying thing. Iran is still trying to use the old tactic, the waiting tactic, the dragging tactic, the tactic of separating issues to regain leverage step by step, but this time under conditions where the time to wait is running out day by day. The most plausible scenario is not Iran surrendering completely, nor America backing down. The most plausible scenario is a temporary agreement, lifting the blockade in exchange for nuclear commitments sufficient for Trump to call it a victory before the November election, while Iran retains enough to avoid collapsing from within. Not an end, but the next phase of the same war, packaged in diplomatic language. The variable that decides the entire course of this has only one: which clock hits zero first, Karg Island storage overflowing and oil wells beginning to suffer permanent damage, or gasoline prices in battleground states reaching the threshold where American voters lose patience in November. For 47 years, Iran has always won by waiting. The only question left is, do they have enough time to wait this time? If you want to continue following every development of this conflict, from nuclear negotiations to every move in the Strait of Hormuz to what is really happening inside Tehran, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We will update as soon as the next turning point occurs.